Let's talk about anxiety. Well, hey there, welcome back. I wanted to give you an introduction to the new series. And rather than add another episode to this, I thought I would just tack this on to our very first episode of something that is going to be a 13-part series. I made the psych charms as a way to have a physical manifestation of something that I call a state of being. When I created them as a proof of concept. I made like 4 of them because my skill set and mindset is of rapid prototyping. I want to see something and see what it would be like in reality. So I made them, marveled at them, put them on my keychain, and then promptly forgot about them. Now, I didn't forget about the concepts because they were weighing heavily in a good way on me, but I forgot I had added them to my keychain because by design, they don't really stick out and you don't really notice them at all. I took them out when I was at a client a few days later, and I took them out a few days later and showed them off, and my client looked at them with amazement. And once we discussed the point of them, and she saw that one of the ones on there represented anxiety, she kind of looked at me and said, so does that help? Does it work? What happens? Like, do you and the way she was asking was with sort of almost a forlorn desire of going, wow. She was mesmerized by something so simple and so tiny, and she immediately wanted one. I thought each one of these has a story, and so many people have a story. So many people are quietly suffering with the effects of anxiety or the challenges of autism or ADHD or depression or even things like suicidal thoughts, which is what started me on this entire journey when I met the girl at the cafe with the tattoo. If you're listening to this, you most certainly probably experience something related to at least one of the charms. And not all of the charms are of what people would consider to be bothersome or afflictions or whatever you'd like to call it. Some of the charms have things like positivity and a systems brain and an idea person and so forth. But with every up, there's a down. There's a downside to everything, and there's an upside to everything. And I'd like to see both, because that's the way stuff works. But I don't want you to quietly suffer. And seeing the look in this person's eyes and seeing the reaction on so many people that I've talked about this with and showed them physically, everyone has something. Everyone has something that they're dealing with. There is really no normal other than normal describes somebody who experiences one of these things. It would be sort of abnormal for someone to say, oh, nope, nothing bothers me. Everything's fine. I don't have to deal with this. This is nope. I just kind of go through life with blinders on. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I've yet to meet a person like that. So these charms and what they represent are so important. And it's so important to me to make sure that you are not quietly suffering and that you are heard and that you are seen, that I think it's only right that we focus on one charm per episode. And in focusing on the charm, we're focusing on what it represents. And that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about what it represents. When we talk about the anxiety charm, we're not really talking about the little cute little thing with a lightning bolt. We're talking about what anxiety means to you and other people. So with that intro, giving us a bonus 4 minutes on our 10-minute podcast, let's go ahead and dive right in. Our first episode is anxiety. Anxiety is represented on the anxiety charm by a lightning bolt. This was one I came up with because to me a lightning bolt strikes out of nowhere and is very intense and sometimes has damaging effects. It seemed to be a perfect fit for anxiety. Those who experience anxiety do so in many forms. There are those that have a bit of anxiety once in a while. There are those that have their anxiety triggered by something that puts them into sort of a downward spiral. And we've talked about that before, in which we have a thought, and then We invoke the three voices, in which the second voice keeps kicking in over and over again. And we're now reminded of something that a parent told us when we were 7 that we've just never forgotten, even though it really, really would have been healthy for us to do so. And then comes the anxiety. And the anxiety can have simply mental and processing effects where you sort of have a brain fog or your mind is racing. But it can also, and usually likely, have physical components. I mean, when you have what's called an anxiety attack, you may have a racing heartbeat. You may have a fluttering heartbeat. You may have a weird feeling in your stomach like you're hungry, like you haven't eaten in a while. You may feel sick. You may find it difficult to catch your breath. And the problem is, when you call it an anxiety attack, it sounds like a thing unto itself. And we're compartmentalizing it into this charm that says, hey, anxiety, right? But it has roots and it has causes. Sometimes we go through a stress that's predictable or even not so predictable, depending on what we're doing, whether it's parenting or running a business or what have you. And then we start to feel it kick in. And sometimes we call it stress. And typically in the olden days, we would say, well, I'm feeling really stressed now. And today we would say, I'm having a lot of anxiety on this. The word anxiety can invoke feelings of loss of control. And again, it's no different than what the definition of stress is, in that you have a physical component, your mind is racing, you might feel like you're trapped, you might feel like you need some air. And by just saying, I'm having an anxiety attack, or someone's having an anxiety attack, it can make the person seem weak, quite frankly. To the outside observer, you're like, well, get over it. You be an adult, pull up your big boy pants and get over it. But that's not how the mind works per se. And a number of my books have addressed that. If you have a component in your mind that is triggering and causing you to get into a spiral because, oh, see, you failed. You failed just like your dad told you would fail. Just like they predicted it. Just like your old boss who yelled at you and embarrassed you told you that you were a failure. And this is why, and this is why, and see this, and this is probably connected to this. And your brain goes and goes, and it does what it does best, which is pattern matching. And it says, oh, I'm finding a lot of patterns. You do have a pattern of failure. Oh my God, you should feel terrible. Oh my God, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do right now in your kitchen at 6 a.m? Oh my God. For some people, it can be worse. For some people, it can have a component of paranoia. If you partake in certain recreational drugs or even alcohol, for some people, it can enhance and introduce paranoia where there was none. And you can have general anxiety and general paranoia about things that you shouldn't be paranoid about. You can go to a party and feel perfectly fine and have a great time and get home and go, oh my God, I did it again. I bet I embarrassed myself. What did I do? What did I do? And you think back and say, they didn't like me. They were just faking. They didn't like me. And that is social anxiety. Social anxiety can cause that. And you'd think, well, you have social anxiety, so you're in a crowd and now you're feeling anxious. Yes. Or the sneaky version that I described is it waits till you get home. Because you're too busy trying to have a good time and just assuming you are having a good time, and you're looking around and everyone's having a good time, and you get home and your brain says, that was a big lie. And then you have all this anxiety from that. And there are meds, and you may have consulted with a doctor on that, who sometimes is a little too enthusiastic to prescribe them. You may have decided that you're in need of some exercise or some yoga or some meditation, and that probably also gives you a pretty great impact on being able to control that. But as we know from Three Voices, we know that there are things that have been embedded inadvertently or purposely to cause us to be that way, to kick in our fight or flight mechanism. My God, get away from that. Run. Do whatever you can. Why are you just standing there and pumping you full of adrenaline? Go, run away from the wolf that doesn't exist. Oh, okay. Explaining that to your husband might be difficult. if you're having an attack of that kind that was triggered by something that you don't know about yet, if the smell of the coffee that you chose this week is the same coffee that your aunt had, which reminds you of the incident, and now you're having anxiety, and you look at your husband like he's going to attack you, or you react in different ways, or you come across as a stressed person, it doesn't mean you're crazy. It means that your brain is dealing with input that you're not privy to. That was kind of the basis for Three Voices and my upcoming book, because it's about those things that have been placed by you and other people that trigger you to do something or to not do something, to seek pleasure, to avoid pain. And when you weren't on the memo, you weren't told about this because it subconsciously happened, like the smell of the coffee, it becomes very difficult to even realize what's happening. Thus, the anxiety. So if on your keychain you have a little lightning bolt and you can grab it and say, I know, I'm feeling it. Hello, old friend. Maybe at least you have the wherewithal to go, I get it. I get what's happening right now. And maybe I'm going to have the wherewithal while holding my little talisman to think about the why of it. I'm going to take a little bit more effort to explain it to my husband or my wife or what have you. I can tell you personally, I, for the most part, really never experienced what I thought was anxiety until recently. I understood that things were stressful, and I've had some extremely stressful, unusual circumstances in my life, but I always thought, okay, I'm very, very stressed. I need to relax. I need to get out of here. I always saw the cause and effect, but that's someone being fairly free of certain embedded triggers. But I wasn't free from all the embedded triggers. I did discover a few. And sometimes I would have a physical anxiety without mental or emotional. I go, okay, my heart's racing okay, why do I feel this way? I don't know, I feel fine. And then I would joke my way out of it. It was still unpleasant. So imagine if you have the thoughts to go along with the unpleasant physicality of it. If you experience anxiety, reach out. I would like to know how it feels, how you deal with it, and what you've learned. I'd love to hear that. So let me know. And until next time. By the way, if you are interested in the charms, go to alchemyforlife/charms, and you can see and read all about them and maybe even get one for yourself.
Living life every day, late at night, not okay. All I want, and I pray, all I need are some better days.
Do you have a story to share or a question? If your idea makes it to a podcast, you will receive a shout out as well as a token of my appreciation. Join the community, patreon.com/alchemy for life.
All I need are some better days.